Hello, look at all of you. What a pleasure to see you here. We got early birds in the house.
Only 1 minute. Hi, Leah.
Hello, hello, hello. What I love to do with people that are showing up is to have a moment to hear your voices and get to hear where you're beaming in from, and if there's something really specific that you were looking for out of today's class. And because we're in unusual times, I'm going to make an unusual offering, which is to someone's got a dog barking in the backyard. I'm just gonna see if you can't maybe place yourself on mute. But to say, what story are you living in today? Right? We are living in a really wildly, quickly changing time, and we're living in a lot of stories. So I'm not going to actually ask you to talk story because there's a lot of us, and we came here for a class, okay? But I do want to give people an opportunity to say, hello, my name's Leah Lamb. I'm beaming in from Topanga, California, and the story that I'm living in is a radical time of transition and possibility. So that's the opportunity. Not everyone has to speak or say something, and some of you might choose to put it in the chat, but I do want to create an opportunity for us all to just beam in for a moment and to say your name, your location, and what story you're living in right now. Just the title of it. Yes, Carol.
Okay, so I'm Carol, and I'm in the outskirts of New York, the suburbs. And for me, the title of my story would be The Great Human Initiation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I also want to make space for everyone to be very real and honest about what story they're in. You know, I'm an optimist, so that's the place that I speak from. But like the opportunities for us to be real. Just this is a moment we can just be real about where we're feeling today in our story. Okay. Who's next? Yes, Esther. Oops, you are on mute. Hold on, my dear. I can't hear you. Oh, I don't know how to take you off mute. Hold on. Let's go on to the next person. We're going to figure out how to take you off mute, okay? We'll come back. Esther, wait, hold on, I found you. You're not on mute. So there's something with your system that isn't working. So one of the things that you can do is you can hang up and you can come back in, and there's going to be something that on your screen that tells you to use your audio from your computer. So you might have missed that step when you came in. So that's what I would suggest. And we'll see you in just a second. Who else raised their hand? I saw another one. Diane and Caitlin.
So I'm Diane, and I'm in Florida, and my title is The Gift of God for Transformation right now.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And for those of you who've been in my classes, you know, but one of the things I love to do to recognize that we have heard the person is we take our hands and we give them a little sunshine, because we can do that when we're on video. So thank you. Caitlin.
Hi, hello. I'm Caitlin Grace. The story I am living currently is one of adventure and discovery.
Where are you beaming in from?
Beaming in from Los Angeles, California.
Ah, right down the street.
Yeah.
Who's next? I see.
I'll go next.
Right.
I see my name. So I'm Evie. I am living in Asheville, North Carolina. And my story is awakening into deep reflection and transformation.
Isn't it fun to get a little sunshine your way?
Yeah.
If you guys aren't already doing it, at the top right corner, it can go speaker view or you can go gallery view. I love to do gallery view because you get to see everybody. But if you just want to focus on the person that's speaking, you can do the other. Okay. Who else?
I'll go next.
Okay.
I'm Chris from a little town, Harmony, Pennsylvania. And I would say right now, radical and exciting change and education.
Thank you. Thank you. And Adril, am I saying your name correct? Help us.
Adriana, hi,
Oh.
I'm Adriana
Okay.
from Colombia, South America.
Hi, good to see you.
And the title for me would be Living in Times of Answers.
Mm. Lee Lambert is saying, I know we've got two, or an alliteration, and the story that she is in is counting my blessings and tapping into gifts to share, while also dabbling into fear and worry here and there, and trying to observe it with curiosity. An elementary school librarian in Southern Virginia. Yeah. My mom's in Richmond, Virginia too. And Fricka says that someone's got their mic on. Okay. Anyone else want to speak into our field before we begin?
Yeah, I'd like to say something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Annette.
And this is Annette from London, and I think the journey and the story I'm on is finding joy in the unexpected places.
Enjoying unexpected places. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Right, I'm Gay from New Zealand, and I have to be at a meeting very shortly, so I'm not going to be able to stay tuned in, unfortunately. But I think I'm living the story of the planet strikes out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Rachel Hutchinson is coming in from New Orleans and has laryngitis from COVID. And the theme, and so we're sending you our healing prayers, dear one. So we can just send those straight to Rachel in New Orleans. And that her theme is releasing fears through embracing my light through the strength of a child, with my son leading the way as my teacher. All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
And this is Daniel from the New York area.
Hello, Daniel.
And hi. And for me, the big question about the story is, what story are we going to end up telling about what's happening now? I think there's a conflict of stories, and shortly, to some extent already starting, but shortly the story is going to be who's to blame or what's to do. Is it we should wall ourselves off? We should close borders and close relationships? Or is it we should stop pushing the boundaries of the planet and ourselves? And I'm very curious to see how we tell a story that I think better fits the situation than it's the alien and the other.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And yes, this is we're in the right room, right? Because those of us that are here are gathering under this umbrella of what is it to be conscious creators and what is it to become sacred storytellers in our time. And so we're going to be getting right to that, and we're also going to get to play a little bit with how do we tell the story of our time in a way that's authentic, honest, emergent in the moment, and responsible. Angela's saying synchronicity, being present in transformation, being authentic, and finding in growth periods. Beautiful. Love that story. Okay, I think I saw one more hand that didn't get to. Rhea, did you get to speak? Were you wanting to?
Sure. Hi. My story would be called Trial by Fire: Shamanic Death Initiations, Breakthrough, and Rebirth. Thank you.
Thank you. In Diggy Dreams, you don't have to raise your hand. People that are on video, I can just see them raise their hands. If you're not, you just have to kind of pop off. So I'm going to take you off mute, and I can, oops, you have to take yourself off mute. I don't know why Zoom does that. Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. This is Carmela from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And my story would be awakening. Just basically awakening to a deeper consciousness. And related to the last guy that came on, and really being in a place, kind of reflecting where we're at in this moment and how far back does that go, and what is the relationship to everything that is living, seen and unseen.
Great, beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm going to say, Rika, I hope you're saying your name is right, is coming in from Germany. And my story is one of journey and growth, currently unexpected, adventurous uncertainty. Okay. And I see that Esther is back on. And we're going to do one more hello, and then we're going to jump into our class, and we'll all get a chance to continue to work with our stories. Esther, can we hear you now? Oh, we can't hear you. I'm so sorry. Why don't you stick into the chat box and maybe check in your earphones. Sometimes earphones will change the game. And also, you could also go to Zoom and ask them for support. They might be able to do that. And Fran is saying that she's from Oregon, coming in from Oregon. And that Mother Nature laughs last. Okay, Rika from Germany. Thank you for that correction. All right, so here we are. So if you've had a class with me, some of you have, you know what's happening next. If you haven't, this is all different and unexpected, so here we go. And here's how I like to play. As the beginning of the class, I like to actually begin with our eyes closed. And we start with our eyes closed because as storytellers, we are the seers of this world. So even if you are doing something else, or if you aren't on video, and if you're on the phone, probably not driving, but I'm going to ask you to take this moment and just rest for a moment. It's what the world is asking for us, if not ordering us in so many different ways. Because this is a gift that you can give to yourself and to others in this moment, just to take a moment. Find your breath. It's somewhere in your beingness. Maybe it's stuck in your chest. Maybe it goes all the way down to your belly. Not any story about the right way or the wrong way, the best way or not. Just noticing. How are you breathing right now? Is it deep or is it shallow? And as you become aware of it, perhaps you want to deepen your breath. You want to ground that breath. You want to expand it. I've been finding that stretching right now in particular is very, very handy and useful because our times are being asking us to stretch. And the more that we just do it, it's just a muscle that we're used to doing it. And then it's not something that's foreign and unknown. It's easy. So let's just stretch our insides right now by taking a little bit more extra breath than we're used to. And exhaling slowly. And as you take in your next breath, I'm going to invite you to really pay attention to how are you sitting? Are you leaning forward? Is that how you meet the world right now? Are you leaning forward? Are you a first responder? Are you trying to figure out how to help? Are you trying to get in there? Are you well balanced? Are you grounded? Are you just like centered, just on top of your sit bones? I'm not asking you to change it. I'm asking you to notice. Or are you leaning back? Are you slunched? What is your natural somatic response right now in this moment, in this time, without making a story about how it's supposed to be or how it could be or how it should be? Just how is it right now? Just noticing. And what does it feel like? Perhaps you're in the exact perfect position for you right now. Or perhaps in noticing this, you're like, I'm a little collapsed. I would like to engage my core muscles, straighten my spine. Perhaps you want to roll back your shoulders, open your heart, When you roll back your shoulders, this natural thing happens where your hands can open, and all of a sudden your hands are open enough space to receive while your heart is open. That might feel really good to some of you. That might feel a little bit overly vulnerable to some of you. Again, there's no right or wrong way. We're just looking at what is in the truth of our bodies right now. And this process of being aware of the emergent process, this is the key to creativity, it's the key to innovation, and it's a key to how to be alive in the realm of sacred storytelling right now. This is all connected. I like to close our eyes because as the storytellers, we are the seers of the world, we're the lookers, and we're not just stating the facts and information, right? We're doing something else. We're making meaning of what we see. We're actually these extraordinary metabolizers. And we're also looking through the multiple dimensions. So we don't just look at the first dimension. We don't just look at what's being said. We look at how it's being said. We look at who is the creator of that story. We look at what drives them. We look at their consciousness. We look at that world that they're driven through. And then all of a sudden, we determine based on all that information, how do we manage that? How do we metabolize it? How do we contain it? How do we give it a place in a greater world of mythos so that people have a new way of seeing what world they want to live in and what role they want to play? That's why we start with our eyes closed, so that we can look at where our own vessel is. Because we see the world through our own perception. And the more aware we are of our own lenses and our own perspective, the more opportunity we have to see more things in different ways. And as Daniel pointed out, we are living in a world with a lot of stories happening at once. And storyteller's a great illusion is that it's all in the telling, but it's really in the listening. That's actually the storyteller's number one job, is how do you listen? So I invite you just to tend to your ears right now. We went a little bit to our body, but now into your ears. What are you listening to? And can we just take a moment to take the listening outside of our brains? What sounds do you hear in the room right now? How attuned to this moment can you become? Continuing with your breath. So I'll start you off with a couple of quotes. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or to hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward and they tell us what to do, and we do it without questioning. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear them, to question them, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. That quote is by Rebecca Solnit. I love starting off with that quote because it really talks about the journey of the storyteller in terms of that perspective of first you gotta see it, then you gotta be able to name it, then you gotta have some discernment. What stories are you going to be willing to carry at this time? What stories do you want to amplify through your magnificent voice, through your magnificent life force? So now more than ever, I'm making a call for us to be conscious creators. And I love that quote because it speaks just to that. And now this quote from Martin Shaw. That last quote was by Rebecca Solnit. This quote is by Martin Shaw. The business of stories is not enchantment, and the business of stories is not escape. The business of stories is waking up. And I love that too, because it really speaks to the journey of the role of the storyteller. You know, back in the day, the storytellers were, you know, journeying from village to village, right? They carried the news. I love that. Have you ever looked up that news? You know, it has the acronyms of North, East, West, and South. You know, they brought the news from all the directions, and they carry that information. They were the history keepers, and they were reminding people, hey, you know, don't do what these guys did, because, you know, make sure that you remember, make sure that you learn from what happened before you. They became bards. They were the forced entertainers. They would tell the kings and queens exactly what they wanted to hear in the way that they did. And sure, they could make their jabs and have their fun, but let us not over romanticize the role of the bard in that role, because they were in that position of telling people what they wanted to hear. Now, storytellers in our time, in our emergent consciousness, have, and with what we understand about the power of story, that's what we're going to gather around today and talk a lot about, is that we are actually the weaver dreamers. We are those people that are literally weaving the new dream. Or perhaps we are casting the seed of the next vision, planting the seed of the next vision. Or if we're not being conscious about it, we could be planting the threads of the nightmare. So this is that call for really calling forward into what is it to be so aware of what we're going to speak about. So I invite you to, this is a highly interactive class. You know, I'm going to go a little bit to my normal script, you know, because I've been teaching this free weekly class for about 2 years now. And I'm also going to go wildly off script to meet the moment of our time, because that's what's being called from all of us right now. So you're going to get a little collaboration of that. But in general, you know, what's bringing us together is this call of what is sacred storytelling? How do we use our voices in a powerful and meaningful way right now? So one of the things that we're going to go through in all of this today is I'll introduce you to the landscape of sacred storytelling as a sacred art form. We'll talk a little bit about what is a story, so we can all get on the same, at least get in the same story about what a story is. Why is it relevant to times we're living in? I think Daniel really spoke so eloquently and beautifully about that. 3 things that oftentimes we don't take into consideration. And then we're going to do a little bit of story work, a little bit more than usual. So usually this class is just an hour. Some of you might have more time on your hands than normal, so I might go a little over past that time. And then at the very end, you know, for those of you who come just for the class, you've set free. And those for you who want to talk and explore about joining a community of storytellers, I'll have some information at the very end about that. And then what I really appreciate is getting to hear from you throughout the whole time. So if you have a question, by all means, please throw up your hand or place your question into the chat box. There's going to be times when I'm going to ask a question, and I'm really asking. It's really fun when we get to all engage and participate. It was so nice to hear so many of your voices and what story you're living in at the beginning. So just know that I personally think it's more fun when we get to listen to more than one voice. I also think that's what these times are about. So a little bit about me in terms of, you know, what foundation am I coming from, is that I studied theater professionally growing up in high school and was in a professional theater company, went on to study in New York City with Sandy Meisner, went on to go to summer stock and thought I was going straight off into the world, started working off Broadway and quickly realized that that was not my world. But I got to understand what the power of story and the power of live performance. And I got to understand that something magical was made, that there was this extraordinary field that was sort of unexplainable when you bring everyone's energy together and it's in a shared experience. I ended up going off and working as a wilderness guide for many years. And in that place, I would honestly say that's where I began to learn how to listen deeply, not just for my own head and for my own ego, and not just to the teachers, but also to the Grand Master Teacher, you know, to me, which is our land, this earth, this planet. And that is really where that came from. I ended up getting a master's in social work, where I learned systems theory, strengths perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about how do we look at the climate story and really look at what this word empower means, you know, enable, all these things, and how does that happen through the stories that we live and how we are lived by our stories. And then I had my own epiphany, fantastic crisis of health, which really aligned me because I thought I was going to lose my voice. Like slit right across my throat. And it was that gift. And when I came out of that gift of understanding how valuable this thing is, our voice, that I started my own nonprofit called the Performance Initiative. We started utilizing the arts for social change right away, got very deeply involved in politics and getting young people engaged to vote no matter who they were voting for, but just knowing and believing that if we're all engaged, we're all better off. And ended up working with Al Gore and launching the Green Channel at his television network. And was right there in the crisis communication movement. And we were really looking at how do we talk about it. And I was working off of this recipe. It's the information that we need to give people that would give them the inspiration to motivation to activation. And after a couple of years of doing that, I learned that I was asking the wrong question. It wasn't the information. It was what story do people need? And it took me to a very humbling place to understand that two things. One, that thing that was so authentic in me was actually the driving force, and it wasn't that external thing of all that stuff. And two, to really understand that people don't need more information in this time. They don't need more data. They need to understand how to make meaning of the data and make meaning of the information and put the information in the right place in the story. So I can go on and on and on, but I ended up starting my own school for sacred storytelling. I now work with story as a form of sacred art form, and we do story ceremonies and use it as a form of alchemizing transition and transformation in this time and space. And let us get right into it. So, you know, there's been a lot of old ancient civilizations that have a lot of knowledge on language, and the Hawaiians believe that the words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or set it into motion. The Sicilians believe that words can poke holes in the universe. So think about the last time you said something you can't take back during a fight. The Australians say that the stories of the past must be sung to the present so that the future can exist. The Maoris say that the words don't describe the things, they are the things. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I want to say that again because I really want you to get that this is kind of an amazing thing, that all of the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. So when we start thinking about, you know, humans' unique role on the planet at this time, and so many among us spoke these positive stories that they're in, and I'm going to imagine that some perhaps among us also are not in that positive perspective, and that's okay. We gotta be so real and authentic because it's all real and authentic right now. But what do we choose to speak and how do we choose to speak it is what we will get to play with today. So abracadabra is one of the oldest words on the planet. It comes from an Aramaic mysticism, and it says, I create as I speak. Create as I speak. So let's go straight into this thing. What is a story? What is a story? What do we know about it? We are, you know, we are humans, we are storied beings. So there's no right or wrong answer. What do you know as a story? And so I'm gonna invite you into also a way of thinking, right? So I learned this from Stephen Jenkinson. It's the art of eloquence. So sometimes we think we need to be clever and have the exact right things to say. And so let's just take that out the door and throw it to the side and say, what is it to be eloquent? To be eloquent is that person, you know, you're grounded to the earth, you're open to spirit, your ego is a little off to the edge, and you open yourself to allow what wants to come through to emerge. You also know how to be succinct. So it's not about going on and on and on, okay? But it's about knowing that the inspiration can come through you when you open it and you have the intention to allow that to happen. So perhaps you want to wonder with us about what you know about story, or perhaps you know what it is, but I invite you to play in that game of eloquence right now. Okay. What do we know about story? You can raise your hand or you can place it into the chat. Don't go quiet on me now. I know that you know. Okay, Carol. Wait, you gotta take yourself off mute. I don't know why. Some people sometimes it does.
Okay, can you
There
hear
we
me
go.
now?
Yes.
I think it touches that deep archetypal knowledge and symbolic knowledge, both in the collective, but also for yourself. And if you can take that and then start weaving it together, you have some awfully powerful tools just to start with.
But say
So
that
that
first thing again that you just said, 'cause that was beautiful.
I actually forgot, but let me try again. It's the archetypal knowledge, both personally and in the collective, that you can access, and the symbolic wisdom in your psyche. Carl Jung had said that actually our psyche and unconscious speaks to us in symbols, not in words. And so you make this incredible connection to different layers of the psyche that you cannot when you're speaking language without these archetypal symbols.
Okay. So Carol, she just took us way deep in. So why start small when you can go big? Thank you. I love that. So let's like have a moment and like actually kind of unfold a little bit of what she said. So she went into the language of symbol, she went into the language of archetype, right? And she took us straight to metaphor. So she took us out of the world of literal and she said, okay, so story is this thing that actually perhaps lives in another plane where we're looking at metaphor, and metaphor, as I understand it, it's the language of spirit, right? And so and then also that it's not literal. So when we tell a story, 10 of us could sit around a fire and we could hear the same story, or 30 of us could be 35 of us can be beaming in from around the globe and hear the same story and yet see and experience different things in it, based on where we are in our lives, based on our perspective, based on what archetypal energies that we're in. So archetypal energy, again, it's those universal themes of, we hear them through the feminine, we'll hear them, the maiden, the queen, the crone, like those are basics, but you could also go the goddess of love, the goddess of compassion, we've got the king, the prince, we've got the hero. These are all archetypal energies and all of them live inside of us. So I'm just kind of, thank you. That was a very rich piece that you just brought to us. I'm going to, Rhea is saying that stories activate the mythic imagination, yes, and allows us to resource the wisdom of the past and future and imaginal realms. And I really love that piece. Well, I'm going to come back because you're skipping a little bit ahead of me, but if I forget, Rhea, to call on what you just said about that they hold this wisdom that we don't normally access on our own, I want to honor that. And then I'm going to pronounce your name wrong again, Adri. I'm sorry. Story is what we create with spirit and mind together. So now she's talking about this collaboration between the human, the mind, right? No one knows where imagination comes from. Isn't that great? We have no idea where imagination comes from, but or at least not scientifically. And so, so now we're talking about there's the collaboration between our human selves and the spirit. Story is a fluid vehicle of understanding ourselves and our communal world, right? Sort of understanding ourselves in the world. Thank you, Jennifer. And Rachel is saying that it reminds me of Maya Angelou's story and how she became mute after realizing the power of her voice. That's why I love poetry and song and writing, because it mostly comes from listening to the inner knowledge, but also gaining the confidence and allowing it to be spoken through your own tongue. Stories let us learn levels beyond below the conscious knowledge levels with mind, heart, and spirit, says Rika. And Daniel saying stories are how we think. There's a parable that I like about that. Daniel, perhaps you can tell us the parable before our time is done, because gosh, don't we all love some good stories? And then Esther is saying, nice to see your voice, Esther. Traditional stories are, to me, living beings we can interact with. For example, most of the time I feel it's more the story that chooses me to be told than me choosing the story. Oh, Esther, we are so on the same page. I experienced that too. So here's another way that I love all of that. And you guys, I just love it. I don't know what's going on, but you guys just went like straight into the depths. And I really, really appreciate that. I'm going to take us back a little bit. I'm going to take us back to the A of Z. You guys took us like straight to Z and into the next alphabet. But let's go to A, and let's come back to that place where humans, as we understand us, have always used the latest technology to explain our bodies, right? So we used to refer to our bodies as machines. Now we're in the era of computer, we refer to our bodies in that way. So what if we look at our bodies, our stories through that mechanism of language and metaphor, and say that they're an operating system, and that these stories, they teach us our belief systems, our values, and what we believe is possible. You know, I've been teaching that for the past, couple of years. And just this past weekend, I heard programming for the very first time in a way that I'd never heard of it, the TV programming. And I was like, how did I miss that one? Totally, that's our programming. Like my programming totally came in from Mark and Mindy, Little House on the Prairie, and The Love Boat. But anyway, so that's what they have as operating system. So now if we look at that and we're like, okay, so this is a basic structure of a story, and that it really does tell us how to live. So some people right now, a lot of people that spoke today, are in the story of radical possibility, reinventing economy. How do we come together in incredible ways? And what are we seeing but a group of people that have already has some skill and knowledge and know-how of how to come together when in states of stress and anxiety, right? Or the unknown. So there's the people that are meeting in this room, or some of the people that spoke in this room. I can't speak for everyone that didn't speak, obviously. I would say that there's a lot of other people that are also in this complete state of crisis. The world is falling apart. How will I find my food? Who's going to take care of me? The stereo of abandonment. So there's all of these different stories that are happening, and what story we go to first comes from the story that we're made from, right? So it's like, and how do you jump out of one story and into another? So this is a little bit about what we're going to play with today. So so that's what a story is. What's a sacred story? What's a sacred story? And some of you guys definitely got a little head and started to speak to it, but I'm just wondering if anyone else wants to speak to defining what's a sacred story. Ria is saying a sacred story, a story as medicine, right? So stories can be medicine, and I love that term, medicine story. And I understand medicine stories to kind of be two different ways. One, a medicine story is a story that, obviously, I think the most well understood stories. It's a story that can serve other people. Like you hear someone's story, sometimes if you're like have a deeply broken heart about love, getting to hear someone else's love story can be like, oh, I just needed to know that love is still possible. Thank you. That's medicine for my heart right now. Or different kinds of things where you're like, just the medicine I needed to hear. I needed to hear a story of courage when I wasn't, operating from a place of courage. Thank you. That was medicine. Another form of medicine story that I really have believed and experienced myself is sometimes there is something in the beingness that won't settle down, that's very upset, and that's banging at you to acknowledge it, and it creates a very upsetting experience. And when I have those experiences, sometimes I'll go in and write a medicine story for myself. And it's that way of coming to the story and saying, please give me the resonance that I most desire. So this is a bit of an advanced skill that I teach in some of my classes, but because people speak to it, I speak to what you guys speak to. This is a full calling out, call and response situation. And so that's how we got into that. Lee Lambert is saying sacred story helps us evolve in some ways, shape, or form. So now you're saying that a sacred story actually has its own intention. And so you're putting that it has a positive intention of evolution. Okay, I like that. One more. What's a sacred story?
This is Alex in Washington.
Hi.
And I think a sacred story is one that ties the small with the larger perspective.
Small with a larger perspective. So I appreciate that. So it's, what I'm seeing is like you might see one person's experience, but in a larger story.
Yes.
And that it helps us, sometimes a sacred story helps us get out of our own little experience and see the greater experience. Or is that what you mean?
Yes, and maybe the other way around too, the larger perspective into the individual experience.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to read a couple more. And Annette is saying a sacred story nurtures us. And we know it is food that we need to grow. And I love that it gives us the food that we need to grow. I'm going to tell you guys, just because you told me that, I'm going to tell you a story that I wasn't planning on telling you at the end. Rika says sacred stories, maybe the stories from around the world that resonate with all of us, or that show up in different clothes across different cultures. That's such a great point and perspective, because so many, almost every old story that you hear, you can find it having emerged on each continent. Like many different continents have their own version of Cinderella, which is kind of fascinating. But what you also spoke to is that there's a resonance in it. And that's kind of a bigger topic that we're not going to get into, but this kind of a wild thing that I'll just say a little bit about, which is that, stories, we use our voice, and it's a frequency, it's a melody, right? And that it actually, we resonate with other things. So if I speak from my heart and you're living in your heart, you're going to really hear what I'm saying, right? But if I speak from my fear and you got a lot of fear in you, I'm going to activate your fear too. And so there's this thing that we do in our resonance, and we can call out different energies in people. So again, this is my call for conscious creators. Be so aware of the stories that you tell right now, because you will activate that energy, in other people. And Idris saying sacred story that we build with the divine. Okay, so now you've set me up so perfectly. So here's what I understand about a sacred story. A sacred story is something that has a life force all its own. It is made in collaboration with, we'll all use different words. Some people are going to say the divine, some people will say the muse, some people will say the ancestors, some people will say the earth speaking out loud, some people will say God, some people will say their deities. What I understand is that it's something that's made in collaboration with that life force that can't be seen, but can be felt, known, heard, and experienced. And so for me, when I understand what it is to work with a sacred story, it is a very humbling experience to be able to be quiet enough in your mind to understand that I am not the one that needs to know the answers right now, that I am the one to listen and to, with a clear intention, then speak what I hear. But that, let us not skip over probably the most important step. If you are someone that is in the business of making and creating and calling in and speaking out sacred stories. Sacred stories might be an old story that's carried forward, or you might be someone that's building the new story. And if you're building the new story of our time and you're planting the vision of our future, I would call that a sacred story. That is a story that has great intention, right? We're looking at the intention to serve life thriving. And to me, that's what defines a sacred story, is that it's a story that's here in service of life thriving. So when I sit down to listen for a sacred story, oftentimes, it's a delightful experience, because all kinds of wisdom, see, I'm calling back to whoever spoke to the wisdom that lives in stories, that there's a wisdom sometimes far beyond my own years that comes through. And yet people are like, oh, Leah, you're so wise. And I'm like, well, I just listen to sacred stories. The stories are talking, and I get to, both. As a storyteller, you get the credit of doing the hard work and the discipline of being able to listen and speak them. And then you also know that it is a humbling, collaborative process of working with that inspiration with the muse. So if we go into that and we say, okay, and Diggy Dreams, I love that. And Diggy Dreams, it's like you got a rhythm there that to your name is saying a sacred story is a living spirit, and I wholeheartely agree with that too. That it is something that has a life force all its own, and that when you start really getting into them, it's like, I'll tell you, just do a slight cautionary tale. I've gone so far off script because the times are calling for this, but that when you say yes to telling a new story, that story will be lived through you. It can be lived through you. So, and when we're in the business of changing stories, and that's what so many people are doing. There are codes to respect, You have to understand and respect that old story. You don't go up to an elder and say, I don't like the way you look anymore, and smack it in the face and say you're useless. What have we learned in our society? That is no way to be. And yet some of these old stories that are among us are no longer in service. We don't smack them or try to kill them or bury them. You know, as we just said, these are beings with a living spirit. They've got a soul of their own. They've been serving something. And maybe it's not us any longer. So what do you do with that? But you stand back and you respect it and you honor it and you look at the bones of that old story before you dare to start to change it. So again, wouldn't normally teach that. That's one of the advanced classes of how to change a story, but here we are, just wildly going off script. So, okay, so if that's what a beautiful soul, if that's what a story is, a sacred story, what is not a sacred story? What's the opposite of a sacred story? And I call that a zombie story. A zombie story is a story, I would say, most oftenly made without intention. Okay, so I've had a lot of people say, oh yeah, I just listen, I just open my channel and like any old thing that comes through and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no. We've got a wild, wicked, very full collective unconscious consciousness that you can call on, right? You don't want to be calling on all the fear. At least I don't want to be calling on all that fear. So it's like, zombie story is a story that is perhaps made with someone that is not completely attuned to what it means to be a conscious creator. And you have to look at what are they in service to. So my very first question to you as conscious creators and as sacred storytellers is, what are you in service to right now? What are you in service to? You know, maybe you're in service to community and a new paradigm. Maybe you're in community service to love or unity. There's no right or wrong answer, but I really, before you start calling in your new stories, really get clear. What are you in service to, so that they come through your stories? So now we go into this place of really understanding, you know, what a zombie story is. So what's an example of one? My favorite example of a story that was not in service to us and most likely made without consideration was Jaws. So Jaws was written by Peter Benchley, and then it was picked up by Steven Spielberg. It's the very first film that he ever produced. What are they in service to? It's our very first question. We always want to examine our stories through their creators. I don't know Peter Benchley's intention when he wrote Jaws. I do know Steven Spielberg's intention. He was young and he really wanted to be recognized. And he wanted to go on to be a very successful director. And he had a very good sight for what would make people look, right? Because, you know, all of us have peripheral vision. We evolved, we've got to look at what's dangerous, you know, so he found that. They take this movie, it's the very first film ever filmed out in the open ocean. Okay, whether you speak the language of symbol consciously or not, you are in that language. It's the oldest language of all the humans that we understand and know. And so it's, what does the ocean represent but our consciousness? Okay, they take that shark in there and it broke the big metal shark. So then what do? We don't get to see a fake metal shark as we watch this movie. They were smart movie makers and they just showed us pieces of it. And so it instantly went into the symbolic realm. And that shark began to represent, the pieces of the shark began to represent our fear of the unknown and our fear of death. Fear of death is in the oldest story that we know of by humans. So Gilgamesh, fear of death. So that story, we can actually point back to being single-handedly responsible for the mass kill-off of sharks in the ocean. So this is a really critical situation where there's a keystone species that we all want to rely on for our own health if we are eating out of the ocean. When Peter Benchley realized how damaging that story was to the ocean ecology, he spent the rest of his life trying to undo that damage and became a steward and champion for ocean protection. So I use this as a cautionary tale because it's not like, you know, bad people go out and tell bad stories that create damage and harm. But I don't think that at all. I think that there's a stage in our own conscious development right now where we are stepping into understanding the power of our word, the power of our stories, and that we as humans have this really wild ability to create things with our words. So that's that cautionary tale. Okay, so Right about now is when I usually go into this whole thing about what stories do. But I kind of feel like I'll show you this and then we're gonna do some interactive activities. Does that sound like what people would like to do? Do a little bit of, yeah? Okay, so um, there we go. Small thrills for a changing world. No long descriptions. Okay, so, what do stories actually do? And I'm going to go through this really quickly. Um, they create connection. There's this neuroscience that when I talk and I create an image through my story, you start to create that image in your mind. We are co-creating a reality together. We can reality bend, we can time bend, we can time travel, we can create creatures that were never known or seen before, and we're doing it without any other technology other than our voice and our listening. Mind blowing. So what I call magic, and what I talked about earlier today when I was in the room of theater and you could feel this magical field happen, it happened because there was listening happening, a place for listening. So that is one of those key things. And Princeton calls this neural coupling. So there's lots of research on what happens when our brains connect. I really feel like when you step on the path of as a sacred storyteller, you're stepping onto the path of eldership. And so this doesn't mean that you need to be older. This is about what does it mean to have a village-minded sense? What does it mean to be considering those around you? What does it mean to understand the power of your word and how it leaves a wake behind you in every room? It creates belonging. We talked a little bit before about healing. Talk a little bit about how it creates bridges to past, future. It creates bridges to different truth and love. I'm just telling you, I have never and ever in all my time sat in a room and heard people's stories and not fallen in love with people. It's one of those things where it doesn't matter what your politics are anymore. It doesn't matter what your perspective and all this stuff. And when you start to hear people's stories, it opens up a space. So now let's do what I feel like. I think that one of the things I would love to do with you is to create. Normally, I have people write wisdom stories, but what I'd like to do with you guys is to give you an opportunity to write a dispatch from the future. Okay, and a dispatch from the future. This is you living in the future, and this could be 5 years from now. It could be 6 months from now. It could be 2 years from now. And this dispatch from the future is it is something where you get to think about what has changed in the world. So there's a couple of different ways that you could take this. You could take this in the way of what are you grieving right now? In terms of what is something that you have just realized that you lost and are very, very sad about. Or you could go into the place of, and I'm going to read you guys a couple of these just so that we can get on the same page. Or what is something that you see as an unlikely, kind of incredibly positive outcome? So, for example, I'm going to read you a couple of dispatches from the future, and then I'm going to invite you to start writing your own. And here we go. Sorry, I didn't plan to do this with you, so it's just taking me a second to find these for you. Okay, so this one comes from a state of grief, and I like to use poetry when I'm in grief. I realized I've turned on some music the other day, and I realized, oh my God, it's going to be a while before I'm going to get to sit in the room and dance with people. And I broke down crying. And so I take my grief to the page, and I like to play with it. So this is what I wrote. Breaking news from the future. When people realized that they would not be able to dance and make music in large groups together for a while, tears of grief fell from cheeks to the streets. They say the salt from their tears had a most unexpected consequence, as it called forth a songbird that had been ignored and unrecognized for nearly half a century. So again, what are we looking for? We're looking for that in this, that strange, unexpected twist that we can only see from the future. This songbird, now known as the red-hearted glebe, arrived suddenly, as as it called to by name, as if called to by name, as it followed the source of those tears. They say it sang the sweetest heart-opening, toe-tapping, lip-smacking tune, and you just couldn't stay still once it arrived. The red-hearted glebe had a strange and special trick up its feathered sleeve, and just like the whales, it carried one song from one place to another place and then dropped it off. It carried the song of grief that can't be held any longer away and left the resonance of what is left behind to be sung to those who did not know how to sing such a thing. The people were so grateful for this being in their lives that they passed a moratorium and made a sacred promise to never once place the red-hearted glebe behind bars in a zoo or take a feather unless it was given, since it had proven that it would always recognize the answer and answer the call when it was needed. So again, that's kind of a silly, goofy one. And here's another one that we could play with over here. Sorry. Well, let's just, I do want to give you one more thing. Okay. Here's a goofy one that, again, we're looking at. This is more serious. So, dispatch from the future. Corporate America partnered with politicians to face the music and deal with their shit. They launched a global campaign to stop wiping asses with trees and launched major campaigns to beg activists to support them in a major campaign called Stop Using Toilet Paper Now. It was an odd transition that inspired advanced societies to recall the practical applications of cleanliness known by indigenous people around the globe. They say some even sewed their own reusable toilet paper. The result was a massive increase in forests. Bird populations soared, carbon emissions went down, and strange but true, one of the most unexpected and unintended results led to more singing, which led to higher oxytocin levels and strengthened resilience of imagination. Strangely enough, the composer who developed the three-pronged harmony that is responsible for inspiring peaceful conflict on the planet says it was in this moment of finding a way to deal with his shit without causing harm or injury to another, broke open his heart to hear this new melody that changed the course of the planet. So again, how do you find humor and strangeness and oddity while also directly kind of looking at the times that we're in? So pick that thing that is on your mind. Maybe it's toilet paper shortages or something that you're grieving, or maybe something that you really want to see. I did another one all on how all the bookstores went empty because people started turning towards the artists for the vision of our future. So I'm going to give you guys, let's say 6 minutes to create your dispatch from the future. And then we're going to come back and we're going to get to hear a couple more of those. So I'm going over the normal hour because I feel like more people have a little bit more time to play with right now. So I'm going to just be a little bit more generative with our time. And I'll see you in 6 minutes. Okay, so you've got about 1 more minute to just bring your dispatch to a close for today. And I think we've got time to hear 3 or 4 reports in from the future. Who would like to? Oh, Sharon. Yeah, I hate it when this happens. Let's see here. Sharon, you gotta get off of our world, my dear friends. Can you please hit stop share? Um, let's see here. Okay. I finally learned how to do that. Okay, so who has a dispatch from the future for us? I see a hand, a bold voice, more people coming on the screen. There's no right or wrong way. I'll read Rika's, who's coming in. Rika says, her dispatch from the future, you have to take on your really your reporterly voice because it's really fun. In the times of keeping our physical distance from each other, we learned how to connect in other ways again. The impromptu evening singing from balconies and windows opened in nearby clinics to let patients hear where one of the seeds, connecting through music, singing, chanting, sound from the heart to heart in creation of the ephemeral became valued again and spread quickly as practice to carry forward to our modern days. She's speaking about a new virus. Do anyone else want to use your own voice before I read someone else's? You're getting all shy on me. There we go. Hi, Alex.
Hi. So after the age of the great pandemic, people had to rely on their own resources to a much larger degree than they ever did before. And they started to find that there was a certain amount of peace and self-reliance in how they were living. And when the restrictions were lifted, they found that they were not really responding to advertisements. They would laugh when people said, you will feel much better if you use this deodorant. And they would find that the promises of a lot of the commercial things just didn't ring true anymore. So the industrial folks were getting very worried about this because people were not buying and consuming and using things in the way that they used to. So they said, we will offer a prize to whoever can be the most convincing person to get people to buy again. And they were totally unsuccessful because people were sitting and living their lives, and they found that they had all turned into cats.
So the spell was cast and humans turned back to their true form of cats. I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, Rachel says, I heard dispatch from the future. While everyone noticed that the most vulnerable that were to be, hold on, that were to be affected were dying, everyone suddenly stopped clinging to the fear of being vulnerable to the idea of losing the unseen war of needing to forgive. The need to forgive the weaknesses of their parents, siblings, or even themselves. Suddenly, the need to feel the tingle of love that only that person could fuel was much greater than the need to hide behind the fear of losing their own self-proclaimed wars that helped aid themselves into their own secluded illusions. Forgiveness is what would be known as the tool toward the Great Awakening, the key toward mankind's journey toward love, the axe that smashed the walls of hate and resentment. It was the greatest gift they all could have given themselves and to the world. Lessons are toughest to learn when we are left in self-distancing seclusion. So I hear this as a story. Again, we're hearing a story of in our future selves are talking back, saying that spells will be broken and that forgiveness is part of the vaccine is a word, but one of the medicines of our time. And did I see another hand go up? Is there someone else that wants to read? Carol? Yes. And then Lori? Okay. You ready, Carol?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So I'm a little bit bashful. I've never done this before. I hope I did the assignment well. I say, children, please take your seniors' torches and handle them well. The immature ones of little self-knowing should never have been allowed to do what they did with it, what they did. This flame could create fires. It could create fires that snuff out forests. It could be snuffed out in people's lives, making them feel worthless or into flaming narcissists that they try to cope so that they, in the ways that they cope. Dear children, accept this fire, kindle its warmth and life, and share it graciously with others. Dear children, let yourself shine in truth and the true fire of your heart, and use its power to nurture life or not, but please let it light the way for a beautiful future for you and others.
Thank you. It's like a letter from a future grandparent advising us through these times. Thank you, thank you. We'll do one more. Okay, Lori. Oh, maybe two. Oh, and Daniel. Okay, we'll do three more. Okay. Lori.
Hello. I'm actually Christy. I don't know why my name's coming up as Lori. That's my partner. Somehow I think she's got signed into Zoom. So
okay.
Hi, I'm Christy. Attention, attention, attention. The world is waking up and humans are sprouting in rich, nourishing soils and thriving on love and compassion. These sprouts are rising strong, and when they bloom, they will release a fragrance, a pheromone that will penetrate through the default of the old story and erase it completely. That's right, humanity is coming to its sense.
To its what?
Senses, like senses.
Ah, love it.
Sense. Yeah.
It's like
Thank you.
The new gardens of our future.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, thank you. Carol, and then Daniel. Yep, you.
Hi, I too am a little shy. This is the first time for me. Thank you. So mine's only 6 months from now. She who had been clinging to, nourishing every small seed of hope that he'd soften, awaken, let go, saw him clearly, a burdened man with a long history and many reasons. She who had redirected, accompanied, advised less, lived standing over herself on her own 2 feet, in her own body, and loved him through it, connected deeply in kindness. Her gentleness eased him out. He let go in this era's plague. Her focus helped him calm and plan what could be planned in this time of unknowable upheaval. She prayed that Mother Earth receive him, his weary soul, his cancerous body. She prayed for strength and belonging and new purpose. She bought a new computer when her 10-year-old MacBook died, blessed to have access to the Apple Store on the last day it was open. She wrote the story she'd imagined for years. She wrote the story she imagined writing for years.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Hmm.
And our last shared voice for today, Daniel. Oh, you're muted. Can you take yourself off mute?
I think I've unmuted successfully, yes?
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Okay. The Great Reawakening. 50 years ago, Milton Friedman said the social responsibility of a business is only making a profit, and put millions of people's intuitions to sleep. It was okay to take more from the planet, to throw more out into it, to distance from it and from others. But after a few months, when our biggest companies saw their customers absent, our biggest buildings and vehicles stood empty because of a single tiny microbe, things changed. We are not separate from nature, but tied to it. We live on top of a mountain of natural assets and services, and even a tiny tremor in that mountain shook us to our core. A new, old intuition took hold. The economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment.
Thank you. So a little bit different. Usually we work on our wisdom stories at this time, but it felt like right now, it felt really important to really develop our skills as visionaries, as what is it to look into the future, to see what is possible, to name it, to claim it, to articulate it, and then to plant that seed for those around us, talking back from the future and saying, this is how beautiful the world is. Now let's find our path there. And so I today received a world where the spells were cast, were broken, where marketing to our lowest, to our fears becomes impossible. You know, a world where gardens and singing and dancing and collecting ourselves and understanding how rich we are, you know, beyond what we hold in our hands as cash, but the land that we live on. So thank you for planning all of those visions. I really received them. And for those of you who are done, who just wanted to come for the class, may you be free. And that is the class for today. I'm going to take a couple of moments now to just talk about ways that you can continue to work in the world of sacred storytelling with me if you want to do that. And I'm also going to do something I've never done before, which is I'm actually going to ask for you guys, like, what do we as a collective need most right now? You know, because I'm lucky here where we have this big online school and we have a lot of different things that we can offer people. And I'm just curious about to hear from you. So that is what is happening now. So for those of you who do want to continue to play in a collective with other people in a small group, I happen to have an all-day creative intensive coming up this Saturday. And this is a part of a series, a year-long series that I teach, and it's called Working with Story as a Path of Initiation. I had no idea what we would be headed for when I created this series 4 months ago, but it came through very, very strong and interrupted a couple of other things that I was working on, and it said, this right now. And what I heard was that, you know, when people were more in relationship with the land, we had ways, and more in a village making ways, we had ways of honoring the initiations that we go through from the time of birth, the time of death. And as we become more and more distanced from that way of living and from the land, we don't have those ways of ceremoniously marking those rites of passages, but it doesn't mean that they aren't happening. And the thing about a rites of passage is that there's a couple of things that you really need. You need community to be able to be both witnessed, reflected, and called out. Like there's a process that's an absolute necessity part of it. You actually, like, what happens in initiations is that there's a threshold and something will be lost, something will be left behind. You don't know what it's going to be when you go in. It's a mystery, right? But something is gained on the other side. And one of the things that happens through initiations is our greatest gifts are called out. So a lot of times, what I understand about initiations, you know, is they can look like great suffering if you don't understand the context and the meaning of what they are. So, for example, right now we are this is an initiation. Our society, like our planet is being initiated right now. And if you understand that it's initiation, you understand that the conflict can actually serve you, that it can call out your strengths that you never knew were there before. It's really the greatest move of Tai Chi, and how to meet the moment and how to meet yourself. And you get to also see your limitations. You really get to understand what you're made of. And then you also have a way of calling out your gifts being known and recognized by your community. And then you have a way of knowing a way of how to plug in, how to be of service, how to be in connection. So to me, this is, it's some of the when we work with stories initiation, you know, and when I first started off doing this, I was like, how could I possibly do this not around a fire in the wilderness? Because that's how you do initiations. And I just kept hearing, do it online. And so little did I know what was coming. And so that's what these programs are. So it's an all-day class, just like any kind of initiation. It asks for your strength. And so we do this, the one that is coming up was, the first one that we did was birth. The second one that we did was love. And we're looking at the stages that you go through and becoming a human. And so the one that we're going to be in this Saturday is in about receiving. So one of the first things that we do as a human is we receive, right? We receive resources, we receive love, we receive all these things. And we're going to examine where you are in your relationship to receiving, because the receiving is on the other side of giving, right? And to be in community, to be in part of a collective, to be connected, that cycle of giving and receiving really requires us to be fully activated in both sides. So we're going to see, and when in the world of receiving, your story of value pops up, you know, your story of guilt, all the different stories, anything. So we're going to really look at what is in your story of receiving that might be blocking you from this experience, especially in a time when now more than ever, we're going to really need to learn how to ask for help from others. And also we're going to need to be able to hear other people's receiving needs in ways that we've never been able to listen before. So it is a 9-hour class. And it's actually, I thought this would be sort of like torture, but it's actually kind of amazing and fun. And you get to work in small groups. I'll never talk this much ever in that time. It's really interactive. You get to do work on your own. You get to do work in small groups. You get to work in a larger group, and it's really great. I put the link right up there for that. So if you're in the chat box and you can see the chat, that's the link for that class. If you're really, really interested and you are one of those people that's being heavily affected and your income has been suddenly knocked out, please just send an email and we can figure out something. If you're really feeling the call and you know that this is your work, then don't let that story get in the way. And what I'll say is that it is a full commitment. So anyone that comes, you have to come to the entire class. It's not like you can come for a section of it. And how many people are enrolled? I think we have, I haven't been tracking, I think there's 8 people that are in the class right now. And so how much is the cost? I think it is $200. I think. Look on the link. I'm so bad at this stuff. But if you look on the link, here, I can look on the link too, and I will see. So if you sign up for the series, it's like, I don't know, like $800, and then that's all of them. And then if you do that class, I'm gonna look at it myself. I should know these things. You would think I would know these things. Maybe it's like 197 or something. What is it? Oh, it's 150. Look at that. Huh. So it's $150 for each class. And then if you want to get the classes that we've done before, so you're kind of all caught up, it's $50 for each of those classes. So that is that. And then when you sign up for the whole series, it's much less. Does anyone have any questions about that particular class right now? Yes, Alex.
So my question is, can you, or request, can you email us all that information, please?
Yeah.
I didn't write it down.
Yeah. You will get an email momentarily with a link to this video and all of that. And the other thing that I would say, and I would just open, is I'm really curious about what do people really need most of this time. So one of the things, what is the commitment for the one class? Lori says, you have to be there for the whole class. That's the commitment. So we start at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So I don't know what time zone you're in. And then it ends 9 hours later. And so that's the commitment. And you'll get plenty of breaks. It's not like we sit in front of a computer for 9 hours. That is not the scenario. But we are together for that time period. So that's the commitment for the one class. And then what I would say is other things that I'm looking at, we weren't planning on doing any more programming until September, to be really honest, because I run an online school where we're in a closed container where we have all these guest teachers, but now I'm wondering, what are people needing through this homestay? And so one of the thoughts and considerations that I had was doing a 30 days of creativity, where a small group could come together, and I would give them something that you could do, and you'd be in a community together. Hi, Poppy, you arrived late, but you'll post this video. Yes, I will. You really did. This is the very last moment. I'm so glad to hear that, Sharon, that you guys did this together. That's great. Sharon said that she did this together. And I do hope that you share this exercise with other people. I'll just say that. So a couple of other examples would be, so one of the ideas that I had was we can do a myth, magic, and medicine class. This is it's a 4-week class. We meet once a week, and you get to learn the different stages of what is it to come into relationship with your myths, your personal stories. What is it to come into relationship to yourself as a creator, and what is it to create and stories that can be healing for other people. So that's one of the classes that we're thinking about putting out, is that 4-week class. Another class is like a 30-day, like, hey, do you need a container of people to be, in that state of creation with, so that you are getting the nourishment, not just of your food, but of, to me, the creative life force is one of the most powerful skills that teaches us everything we need to know how to be innovative in the times that we're living in. So I'm just curious to hear from you if you have any ideas about what you would most want right now. And thank you for all of your notes. I really appreciate all these. And if you have ideas that you'd like to share, I'm open to hearing them. And if not, I will leave you with a quote. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a quote. It's one of my favorites. This is by Stephen Jenkinson. He says, act as if you are a people of consequence so that I can treat you as such. And you matter. What must have happened to people who unconsciously agreed that the best presence in this world is to have no consequence in this world? It's a velvet gauntlet, this idea of being of consequence. It doesn't clink when it hits the ground, but you can feel it. It would be proper to proceed that there is consequence to us being here. That again is Stephen Jenkinson. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you like the classes. So if you feel like you have any last questions, I'll stay on for a couple moments. Otherwise, I will bid you adieu. Have a lovely day. So nice to see your faces. So beautiful to hear what stories you're living in. It's absolute delight. Bye. Oh, here, I'll take us all off mute and we can all say goodbye together.
Thank you, Michelle. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Hi, Leah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
Carol, it's okay. I don't know how to. Oh, something weird. Okay, it looks just different. So my question, I have so much going on, many catch-up details in this complicated life. And I just wonder how structured would the all-day thing be? And, like I'm just trying to feel my way into what would serve me at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things I must, I need to do. That's really required, not just,
Yeah.
So I'm wanting to stay connected and heard in a time of great, perhaps you heard it in my story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any thoughts I welcome.
So for that particular class, that is you really need to be fully focused for the whole 9 hours because we go through a journey together.
Right.
And, I mean, if you want to, I always send out, so for people who register, you get a video class of it, so you don't actually, so you can go through it and do it on your own. Honestly, the fun, the healing, the thrill of it.
It's with others. Yeah. So maybe if not this Saturday, then I'll reread your email. There are other formats you mentioned, right? Because I can tell consistently some sort of belonging in some kind of consistent group over a period of time might work for me.
Yeah. So we have, I'll be doing I'll be offering a 4-week class, and that will start up pretty soon. I'm trying to meet the moment just like anybody else.
Yes, right, you're right. Kind of getting on. Okay, great. All righty, Leah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Great.
That's your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Blessings.
Okay.
I'm gonna sign off.
Any other questions? Yeah. Is that a question? Okay. Bye. Take good care. Bye, Esther.